In the days after conservative activist Charlie Kirk was shot and killed at Utah Valley University, a quieter but wide-ranging story began to unfold online. Dozens of people across the United States are now out of work or on leave because of what they posted about Kirk's death. Charlie Kirk, the 31-year-old founder of the youth organization Turning Point USA, was a prominent and often polarizing voice on issues such as gun rights, race, and LGBT policy. Police say a 22-year-old man, Tyler James Robinson, opened fire while Kirk was speaking, and Robinson now faces aggravated murder charges. Almost immediately, social media reactions split. Alongside messages of sympathy were posts that mocked or celebrated the killing. On X, formerly Twitter, and Facebook, users wrote things like, "Hearing that Charlie Kirk got shot and died really brightened up my day," called the shooting karma, or simply posted, "One Nazi down." Others resurfaced a 2023 Newsweek interview in which Kirk had said some gun deaths were, unfortunately, the price of Second Amendment rights. Employers noticed. Across public schools, universities, government agencies, and private companies, administrators argued that the tone of these posts violated workplace standards and damaged public trust. The result: a sudden wave of suspensions and firings. Educators have been hit hardest. Teachers, professors, and staff in at least 9 states have been dismissed or placed on administrative leave. Examples include a part-time instructor in North Carolina, an assistant cheer coach in Idaho, and an employee of a Texas school district. At Middle Tennessee State University, an assistant dean lost her job after writing she had zero sympathy. A University of Toronto professor was removed from teaching duties for saying that shooting is honestly too good for so many of you fascist cunts. The fallout extends well beyond schools. A FEMA data analyst is on leave over comments the agency called revolting and unconscionable. City employees, EMTs, restaurant workers in Milwaukee and California, a sports reporter in Arizona, and a Carolina Panthers communications staffer have all been disciplined or terminated. Why the hard line? In public statements, organizations have cited 2 main reasons. First, they say the posts conflict with stated values and could tarnish reputations with customers, students, and taxpayers. Second, they argue that celebrating violence creates a hostile atmosphere that undermines safety and morale. Florida's education commissioner even warned that teachers risk losing their certificates if online behavior erodes family trust. That stance has reignited a familiar debate. Where does free speech end and professional responsibility begin? The First Amendment limits government censorship, but it rarely shields employees from workplace consequences. Most American workers are at will, meaning they can be dismissed for any lawful reason, including public social media activity, if an employer believes it harms the organization. Legal scholars point out that the key question is often whether off-duty speech disrupts operations or damages an employer's mission. Some argue teachers' private opinions shouldn't matter if they stay out of the classroom. Others counter that praising violence is inherently disruptive, especially when educators are responsible for modeling civil behavior. Meanwhile, conservative influencers have accelerated the process. Personalities like Laura Loomer and the Libs of TikTok account have been reposting offensive comments and tagging employers by name. An anonymously registered website promises to expose Charlie's murderers by crowdsourcing tips on anyone supporting political violence online. Government agencies are also stepping in. The Texas Education Agency has opened investigations into teachers who shared what it calls reprehensible content.
Several school districts are updating employee training to emphasize that personal social media can still be grounds for discipline. The rapid firings over Charlie Kirk posts underscore how thin the line has become between private expression and professional liability. A single late-night comment, visible to the world, can cost a career in hours. Whether one views that as accountability or overreach, the episode is a vivid reminder that in the digital age, our personal and public selves are never fully separate, and that employers, more than courts, often decide where the limits of free speech lie.
In a significant move to reshape U.S. climate policy, the Environmental Protection Agency has proposed ending the Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program, or GHGRP. Since 2010, the program has required more than 8,000 of the nation's largest facilities, power plants, refineries, steel mills, and more, to measure and publicly report the heat-trapping gases they release each year. It's the backbone of America's greenhouse gas inventory and a key source for scientists, policymakers, investors, and communities tracking industrial pollution. The proposal would scrap those reporting requirements for nearly all covered facilities, including most large industrial sites, fuel and industrial gas suppliers, and carbon dioxide injection wells. In one stroke, the public database built over more than a decade would largely go dark. Why make the change? The EPA says it's about cutting red tape and saving money. The agency estimates businesses could avoid up to $2.4 billion in compliance costs, calling the current paperwork bureaucratic and asserting that collecting this data is not explicitly mandated by the Clean Air Act. Ending the program, the administration argues, would boost manufacturing competitiveness and ultimately lower prices for consumers. Environmental groups, many former EPA officials, and public health advocates see it very differently. They call the GHGRP an essential tool for transparency, one that lets citizens, shareholders, and local governments hold polluters accountable. Without hard numbers, they warn, companies could keep emissions under wraps. Regulators would have weaker evidence for crafting new standards, and communities living near industrial corridors would lose a crucial lens on neighborhood air quality. Critics also challenge the agency's legal reasoning. Congress, they note, instructed the EPA to collect and publish greenhouse gas data so the public could understand national climate risks. Groups like the Natural Resources Defense Council argue that dismantling the program defies that directive and could be vulnerable in court. The American Lung Association goes further, calling the rollback a deadly choice that threatens public health. A few fine print details stand out. Methane reporting from certain oil and gas sector sources would technically remain on the books, yet the agency proposes delaying collecting that data until 2034, tying the postponement to a recent law known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And because GHGRP data underpin the United States' official reports to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, ending domestic reporting could ripple into international climate accounting. The move is part of a wider push to scale back environmental regulations. Recent proposals have targeted limits on power plant emissions and even sought to revisit the endangerment finding, the legal bedrock for carbon rules under the Clean Air Act. Observers at the Environmental Defense Fund note that this isn't the first swipe at the reporting program. An earlier shutdown of its online portal and delays in reporting deadlines signaled the agency's intent.
For now, the plan is only a proposal. A public comment period is open, giving individuals, companies, states, and advocacy groups a formal channel to weigh in before the EPA issues a final rule. Supporters will likely emphasize economic relief and reduced bureaucracy, while opponents are expected to marshal legal arguments and public health data to keep the nation's climate ledger intact. What happens next will determine whether the United States continues to track, facility by facility, the greenhouse gases heating the planet, or whether that chapter of transparent data collection comes to an abrupt close.
In California, a landmark piece of legislation that could reshape the future of housing and transportation has just passed the state legislature. The bill, known as SB 79, aims to address two of the state's most pressing issues: a severe housing shortage and struggling public transit systems. It's a plan that has been years in the making, and its passage marks a major moment in California's ongoing debate about how and where to build. The story of SB 79 is really a story of persistence. For years, State Senator Scott Wiener of San Francisco has been trying to pass a law like this. His previous attempts, bills with names like SB 827 and SB 50, sparked intense debate but ultimately failed to become law. This long fight gave the idea of building dense housing near transit what some have called a mythic status in California politics. But this time, after numerous amendments and compromises, the bill, now called the Abundant and Affordable Homes Near Transit Act, has finally succeeded. It has passed both the State Assembly and the Senate and is now headed to Governor Gavin Newsom's desk, where it is expected to be signed. So what does SB 79 actually do? At its core, the law is designed to allow for the construction of taller, denser apartment buildings near major public transit stops. Think of it as a direct response to decades of policies that have often favored single-family homes and sprawling suburbs, which supporters say have driven up housing costs and forced people into long, traffic-filled commutes. The law works through a process called upzoning. This simply means it allows for more homes to be built on a piece of land than local rules previously permitted. Specifically, SB 79 overrides local zoning laws within a half-mile of qualifying transit stations in 8 key counties, including Los Angeles, San Diego, and the Bay Area. The height of the new buildings allowed depends on how close they are to the transit hub. For example, within a quarter-mile of a major station, like a BART or LA Metro subway stop, buildings could reach up to 7 or 8 stories. Directly next to some major hubs, buildings could even be as tall as 9 stories. A key part of the bill is that it also empowers transit agencies to develop the land they own. This could create a new and much-needed source of revenue for these agencies, which have been struggling with declining ridership. The hope is that by building more homes right next to train and light rail stations, more people will be encouraged to use public transportation, creating a positive cycle of more riders and better funded transit. Of course, a bill this significant did not pass without controversy, and it has sparked a passionate debate about the future of California's neighborhoods. On one side are the supporters, often called YIMBYs, which stands for Yes in My Backyard. Groups like California YIMBY, a sponsor of the bill, see this as a historic victory. They argue that for too long, restrictive local zoning has choked the housing supply, making California unaffordable for many. Brian Hanlon, the CEO of California YIMBY, called the bill's passage the achievement of one of his organization's founding goals, to legalize apartments and condos near train stations. On the other side of the debate are those concerned about the loss of local control and the character of their communities. Many city governments, including the Los Angeles City Council, officially opposed the bill. Opponents worry about what they call a one-size-fits-all approach from the state, fearing that 7-story buildings could suddenly appear next to single-family homes.
Assemblymember Rick Chavez-Zabur argued that for many, living in a single-family neighborhood is a lifelong dream, and that this bill could fundamentally reshape his district. To get the bill across the finish line, several key compromises were made. The legislation was amended 13 times to gain support. These changes included adding requirements for union labor on some larger projects, which was crucial in getting powerful construction unions to drop their opposition. The bill also includes modest affordability requirements, such as setting aside at least 7% of homes in new projects for lower-income residents. And it offers some flexibility for cities that are already planning for significant housing growth near their transit hubs. So what happens next? The bill is now awaiting Governor Newsom's signature, which he has until October 12th to provide. But even after it becomes law, don't expect to see major changes overnight. Experts suggest the impact will be gradual. Building new housing projects takes a long time, and economic factors like high interest rates and construction costs could slow down development.
One developer estimated that we might only see 20 to 30 projects built under SB 79 across the entire state in the next 5 years. Ultimately, the passage of SB 79 is part of a larger trend. The state of California is taking a more hands-on role in housing policy, sometimes stepping in to override local preferences in an effort to address the statewide housing crisis. Whether this law will strike the right balance between state goals and local concerns, and whether it will truly make a dent in California's housing and transit challenges, is something that will only become clear in the years to come.